Good evening and welcome to Watchmen on the Wall. Thank you for joining us tonight. Watchmen on the Wall took its cameras to the Unashamedly Ethical Conference in the Western Cape recently, and we recorded an interesting debate or discussion between some of South Africa's top political parties on the issue of corruption. Hope you enjoy this.
May I then ask to start from the lady's left, from my right, to introduce herself, and the mic would be just passed along as they introduce themselves. Welcome to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm Diane Kohler-Barnard, and I'm the Shadow Minister of Police. That's my portfolio. And I've been a member of the Ethics and Members' Interest Committee in Parliament for 7 years, dealing with some extraordinarily difficult issues, some members who've had to come before us and basically be tried by us. Very difficult job and onerous. Yes, thank you for having me here today. It's been an absolute pleasure to be with you all morning, and I look forward to the rest of the session. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Francois Beekman, and I represent the African National Congress, the ANC. Maybe just to, in short, a background. I've been in politics for about 11 years, 10 years previously. I also practiced as attorney and lawyer, and I also served as head of department in government, so I've been quite involved with that. I also serve on the disciplinary committee of the Dula Umar region of the ANC in the Western Cape, so working with ethical and disciplinary matters on a regular basis. Now, the ANC is committed to ethical and corruption-free society, and I think the challenge is that the values that are enshrined in the Constitution to ensure that that is practically implemented. And I think since the dawn of democracy 20 years ago, that is the big challenge ahead of us. How can we ensure that the principles in the Constitution in terms of accountability, transparency, trickles down to every level of government? And I think there should be a joint approach between the citizenry, the politicians, big business, to ensure that we promote those values. Because at the end of the day, it's quite important that values of transparency, accountability, and good governance is promoted, so that the budgetary allocations are spent well and in accordance with the appropriations. Thank you very much.
Afternoon, everyone. I was just waiting on my timer. I'm Andrew Gasnola. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Agang, South Africa. Agang means let's build. I'm from Cape Town, born on the Cape Flats in a room a tenth of this size with 8 adults, a reality many of us face. And in those circumstances, being ethical is essential. It needs you to survive. And what we need to remind ourselves, those within a government space, those within leadership spaces, both business, civil, and business, and government and political space, is that ethics is fundamental. It keeps us honest, because corruption and unethical behavior steals dreams, it steals possibilities. My background is that I was an attorney in a corporate law firm. I've left that behind to participate in something new, which we all have the opportunity to do 20 years into our democracy, where we can hold our leaders to account. We can say to them that actually we have the power, we have the voices, and our voice is more important than your own self-interest. And in that way, we can shape a country that we can be proud of. And ethical leadership, honesty, a corruption-free country is what builds that. And without that, we lost. Thank you.
My name is Andile Mngitama, and I'm the Commissar for Land and Agrarian Reform in the Economic Freedom Fighters. I understand that you business people here, so I bring you revolutionary greetings from my leader, Comrade Julius Malema. It's not possible to have an ethical politician within a system of capitalism and neoliberalism that basically commodifies life. When politicians are good people as individuals, but the laws and the policies that they make is what we should determine whether they're ethical or not. Up to now, 20 years later in South Africa, that parliament, including the parties that have been there, have not been ethical because the policies that they have outlined have excluded the majority of our people. In fact, we should go further and say most of people in this area are also live unethical lives because they're occupying land which is stolen. They continue to run businesses and the agricultural sector which exploits people. So we need to change that situation. The only way we can change this is to go to ethical politics, and those politics with the politics of fundamental transformation of society to end the 350 years of the colonial settlement in this country. We as EFF, for instance, are very clear. When we go to parliament, those of us will be compelled by law to use public services, because these politicians, they make laws, they're supposed to serve the public, but they don't themselves use the services they provide society, and that is unethical. They steal from society legally. We know there's illegal theft, and that's what all of them are interested in. We are more interested in legal thieving. In other words, making laws that benefit an elite and themselves, excluding the majority of the people. So when we go to that parliament, that's what we're going to do: expropriate land without compensation, nationalize the mines, and make sure that everybody lives well.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. My name is Steve Swart. I serve on the Finance and Justice Committees of Parliament. I'm an attorney, 15 years in Parliament. And we as the ACDP obviously stand for Christian values. We believe in putting God first, as we've heard throughout the whole morning. We stand for freedom of religion, a free market economy with a social conscience. I think that is so important. Family values, it's come through so often this morning. And I think that is so important that we should not, we're your switches, we should not switch off God when it comes to politics and how you should vote. So we as parties here represented in Parliament, we all have our policies on how to address corruption, strengthening the Chapter 8 institutions, strengthening law enforcement agencies, the Auditor General, etc. But surely there's something lacking. And as I've said in Parliament, I've said that a crime-free society can only be created by virtuous people whose individual consciences guard their behavior and hold them accountable. Without God-given conscience, society can only be held in check through coercion. And what we need in our country is 50 million policemen called conscience, self-governance. And that is what we're talking about this morning, is that transformation, the development of character that we need in our nation. And that is why we as the ACDP fully support the Unashamedly Ethical campaign, which requires government and leaders to voluntarily come together and commit themselves to ethical living. And we stand very strongly for family values, because surely that is where it starts. Teaching ethics is in the family. As a Christian Democrat, the future of our nation lies with us as Christians. God is sovereign. He has a plan for our nation, but it is conditional. It is conditional. To conclude, as we said, our people who are humble will hear from heaven, forgive their sins, and heal their land. 2 Chronicles 7:14. Thank you, Madam Speaker. My time is up.
One of the points is that you will know that you're serving on a system which allows for caucus decision as how to vote, which means that if there is a Christian in that party that feels in his own conscience that they cannot agree with this, but by party policy and by the system that we have, they must vote according to that, because even if they are somehow sitting down or not agreeing, or they decide not to vote, they will be brought before the leadership. Please tell us, each one of you, how you will make it possible for a Christian to live and operate and to pursue the values, ethics, values, and Christian clean living.
Make sure you're a member of a Christian party. It's very easy. But I think it does raise the dilemma of your party caucuses that there are, and I'm sure the other parties will speak on that, but the whippery in a party will often determine how one votes. And therefore, it is very important to understand, does your party stand for Christian principles, or does your party allow a conscience vote, or does your party enforce you to toe the party line? Thank you.
We are not a religious organization. We believe in the goodness of outcomes of policies that affect the majority of people. We would be bound by that conscience. Our conscience is to serve, and so that's how we will vote. We are not. We have got Muslims and all types of people, including traditional people who believe in sangomas and so on. For us, that is irrelevant. What is relevant is, are these policies consistent with our mission, which is to change this country and make it a country which is just for everyone?
Agang is also not a religious-based party, but it's founded and guided by the values of our Constitution. Our view remains that those values are the guiding principles, which allows voters to elect leaders of their choosing, which means electoral reform is part of that process. So if you live in Somerset West, you know who your MP is, and if your MP is not voting for the right thing in terms of serving the people, then you have direct access to that MP. So party bosses who decide in a caucus how you should vote, not in the interest of people, but in their own interest, is unacceptable, and our view is that it has no place in a democracy, a true democracy.
Thank you very much. The ANC's approach is very much in line with Section 15 of the Constitution. Everyone has the right to freedom of conscience, religion, thought, belief, and opinion. In the ANC, there's Christians, Muslims, people of various faiths, traditional beliefs, and it's up to those individuals to ensure that their personal beliefs also support their decisions. So any political party is a voluntary association, and it's up to those individuals to ensure that whatever they support is in line with their own beliefs.
Thank you. The Democratic Alliance is a party for all the people, for all religions. We have Christians, Jews, Tamils, Hindus, Muslims, name it. And we try to deeply respect all religions. As such, and the question was actually about the votes in Parliament, as such, when we've had votes that really would be impossible for someone to deal with as a strong Christian, we've allowed a free vote, such as on abortion. So in that instance, people were allowed to vote as they wished. Now, with all due respect to my colleague here, the ANC does not allow that. If you choose to vote against the decision of the caucus, well, we know what happens. So we allow free votes on certain issues which are highly controversial and would be anathema to Christians.
I think many of us believes in that freedom, that people of conviction and people that have a conscience, that they be allowed to abstain or to even talk about it. That is in many parts of the world the way it's going. And I think many of us are praying for the day that people with various convictions that's very deeply seated will be able and allowed to abstain. Now, I'm sitting here with something like 20-something questions, and I'm trying desperately to see where they meet one another. There was a commission appointed by the government some years back, the Slabbert Commission, which was the order to see whether the system of voting that we have now of representation become not so much in a party but in a constituency, so that the people in the constituency can help and hold their candidate accountable, and not that they are under the cover of a party banner where you have nobody as a person in the area that can be held accountable. I gather that people feel that why was such a commission appointed all the expenses was done, and when the recommendation come, it was not adhered to, and we continued with the system that we have, with the listing of the people that the party feel needs to be there, and that they have, in some cases, no responsibility to a particular constituency wherever they may be living or serving. Shall we start at the end again? Have your comments with regards to how your party responds to that?
Our constitution requires that our electoral system is proportional in general.
Yeah.
So I participated in the Van Zyl Commission, and we as the ACDP believe that we should have a hybrid model, similar to what you've got at local government level, which incorporates both the proportional list, where every single vote counts. We are still a society in transition. We need everybody in Parliament. You want to have the EFF in Parliament as well. And if you only have a constitutional system, then you'd have your smaller parties, if you only had a ward system, you'd have your smaller parties would be excluded. So we need to have everyone in, and we would support the Van Zyl Commission's, some of their reports that said we need a hybrid system, combining both the proportional list system, where you vote for the party, plus you vote for an MP, so you know who the MP is. And if that MP doesn't necessarily come in, then you'd also have the votes will be put together for the party. So I think that is the way for an inclusive society, and for a society that is still in transition. I think that is the way to go. Bearing in mind the Constitution says, in general, it must be proportional. Thank you very much.
The big problem here is not so much the system, but whether we have enough democracy and participation of people and accountability of those that we elect. The problem we have right now is we just have one shot. 1 in 5 years, the guys go to Parliament and we don't see them. Then they come back whenever there's another election. So we need to then think about how we hold those we elect accountable, and there must be the principle of recallability. In other words, we as society should be able to recall those who don't perform according to the promises that they make. But now it is the responsibility of the party. There's nothing that stops parties to make sure that the people they put on those lists firstly have support and are known by the communities that they serve.
Agang's started its formation a year ago with an electoral reform petition, very much in line with the Van Zyl-Slabbert report, which essentially brings your public representatives in a hybrid system closer to you. So you have a constituency in Somerset West, in Lavender Hill, and that member of parliament is accountable to you directly. You know who they are. You have voted for them. They're not subject to a party boss. They're not subject to a party which has particular ideas about how to run a country that don't necessarily work for all people. It's essential that electoral reform is on the agenda 20 years into democracy, because what was contained in the Constitution was merely a temporary measure. The idea was always, and that's why the Commission was commissioned by Thabo Mbeki, with the idea that reform would happen, and we are still waiting. And it's essential for us to make that an agenda item that our politicians answer and explain to us why still that report sits in the dust.
Thank you very much. I think one perspective that we must take into consideration is the fact that there's 3 levels of government. So everybody in this room has got a local councillor. There's also the provincial legislatures and the national parliament. Now currently there is a system where political parties allocate their members to certain geographical areas, and that's funded by parliament. But the question is it effective? And is it really regulated correctly? And is political parties, are they making sure that their persons perform? That's the big question. In terms of the electoral system, it's quite important 20 years down the line that we look at all aspects, but it's very important that all elements of society are included in the National Assembly. So if we're going to use a system where, for instance, proportionality is not really intrinsically part of, we'll run the risk that some of the smaller parties will not be presented in Parliament. So that's the question we must ask ourselves. But again, that is, I think, an issue that the Constitutional Review Commission of Parliament in the next 5 years will also look at, and we will support those discussions.
Thank you. Yes, I'm not going to go back over what my colleagues here have said in relation to what the Constitution says, but certainly we do hear of for example, councillors elected and not seen for 5 years. Our party takes service delivery extremely seriously. We have a very strict system, and if anyone is found to be lacking, not delivering, not answering calls, not being where they should be at any time, they come up against a very strong system. And if they're lax, they're eventually worked out of the party. We don't tolerate people who don't deliver. We've also launched a site on our website where you just put in your address and immediately up pops the name of your councillor and your member of parliament. You may have a member of parliament or a member of a provincial legislature running your constituency. All the details there, the phone numbers, everything, and we are all held to account by the same system equally, MPs, MPLs, and our councillors. So councillors aren't expected to work harder than MPs and vice versa. We are all accessible. My phone is never off, and nor should it be for any member of the Democratic Alliance.
The question is, one of them says, is it ethical, the land issue, the redistribution of land, and being in Cape Town, is there any consideration to the Khoi people in your planning here in Cape Town when you are dealing with land distribution? And this is actually particularly to the Commissar.
Let me start by saying that we, in our election manifesto, we make it very clear that the Khoi language has to become an official language. It's actually shocking that it isn't. And that we need to protect the language and the culture and the identity for our people. And we must remember that the genocide perpetuated by those who stole our land was precisely against the Khoi people. These people were wiped out from the surface of this earth to steal their land. And there's no reparations, there's no accounting. So we are clear on that. The ethical question on the land question is to precisely redress the land theft that has been engineered here since about 350 years, and no parties want to do that. We're going to take it back without paying for it, because stolen property.
A question singularly to Mr. Buchman, and the question is that you are an ethical individual who values integrity. Unfortunately, the ANC leadership does not demonstrate these values. How can you be part of a political party that does not have the same values that you have? How do you see what you are doing? Would that bring change?
Thanks for the question. The ANC is committed to a corruption-free society, ethical behavior across society, and a government that is accountable to the people. And that also includes our leadership. Our political representatives must strive to maintain ethical conduct and must realize the effect of their behavior on the integrity of the political office they hold. After the Mangaung conference, the ANC has implemented the ethical committee consisting of senior elders in the party that is responsible for monitoring ethical behavior. All candidates that's going to make themselves available for national and provincial office in the coming elections is subject to a thorough vetting process to ensure that they subscribe to the necessary values and principles that is expected from an ANC candidate. Then, very importantly, one of the decisions by the NEC was that any ANC member or public representative found guilty by a court of law will be expected to step down from any leadership position in the ANC, government and society. Where this has not happened, the ANC will take firm action in line with the provisions of the ANC Constitution. Just maybe to give an example in terms of dealing with that, I want to refer to what happened in Northwest Province at local level, because I think there is agreement that the biggest problem in terms of ethical lapses in South Africa is the question of is local government. And there the ANC fired the Madibeng mayor and councillors and the speaker for allegedly colluding with their senior officials to commit tender fraud in that municipality. The Secretary General of the ANC also indicated that councillors and officials in 22 other ANC municipalities will face the same fate. So there is a commitment from the leadership of the ANC to deal with these matters.
To the DA, it is asked, why does the strategy of the DA seem to criticize the present government instead of using some of their successes to promote the alternative?
Well, there's a great deal to criticize. However, I think you must understand that during our last election, we did not at any stage even refer to the acronym ANC. We did not refer to the ANC at all. We did not criticize it. It was irrelevant to us. We simply told the story about the huge successes we had experienced in Cape Town, turning it into a world-class and recognized and awarded city, having cleaned it up out of the morass it was when Helen Zille took it over, and really turned it into what you've got today. And that campaign worked exceedingly well. I do know that we do put out regular statements. We do perhaps 5 or 6 a day. I cannot be the person who has to answer for the fact that frequently the positive statements don't get coverage in the media. That's a media issue. Good news doesn't sell, so it's not reported. But if there is something that is successful on the part of the ANC, then we're quite happy to congratulate the ANC on that achievement. Sadly, those instances are few and far between.
I think it is only right that we ask the ANC to respond in short and add to that, if such successful recommendations are made, will it be rejected simply because it's not the party, or would it be considered?
Thank you for the question. I think the approach is that, for example, Parliament as an institution is there to represent all the people. And if there is recommendations made during that deliberations or in the discussion of legislation, if those suggestions and amendments are acceptable in terms of the vision and mission that we set out for ourselves, of course, that becomes part of the debate and those amendments will be accepted. So that it's not, for instance, a case where opposition amendments or suggestions are just rejected. That is definitely not correct.
What is ACDP activity? What are these activities during the time between elections? Because it seems as if we only hear and see you during election time. Why are you an invisible party in many areas?
We are involved in projects in various areas. I've got an office in Botshabelo Township in the Free State where we are involved. Obviously, when you compare our number of representatives to the larger parties where they have a greater impact with the media and that, but we are involved in numerous activities in soup kitchens, in clinics that we run in, but obviously one can improve that because the perception is correct that you only see the ACDP at the time of election. Now, our parliamentary work is also very visible as well. Obviously, you might say not as visible as you would like to, but we stand for freedom of religion. We've fought the religious freedom issues. We've stood for churches, and a lot of that is not broadcast. And a lot of what we do as well as Salt and Light is behind the scenes, where we'll either in the Western Cape be trying to persuade the DA or in the ANC at national level to pursue values that we would stand for, Christian democratic values. And so a lot of what is done is behind the scenes. So all in all, it's a very valid issue with all smaller parties, that why is one not visible between elections. Obviously now at the elections there's a lot more interest, there's a lot more money generated, there's a lot more visibility, but it is a very, very valid point that we do take seriously. Vote for us so that we can improve our representativity and you'll see more of us. Thank you so much.
That must be some ACDP supporters clapping there. Okay. Thank you so much. We're carrying on in the time that we have with questions that we ask all of you to answer. Some of them are short. There'll be 3 of them, very short. And just your view when people say, is it ethical to make promises at election time when you know you cannot deliver them?
if Helen Ziller thought anyone was making a promise that we couldn't keep, they would be shown the door very quickly, because that's the surest way to lose public confidence in what you're all about. I mean, you cannot lie to the electorate. People who presume that it's an unthinking mass who vote, that it's an unthinking mass of people who've taken membership with the DA are really very patronizing, and that's not something we could ever allow.
Okay. Thank you. Well, it's quite important that the program and principles of any manifesto must be able, the party must be able to implement that. That is quite important. And it's also quite important that parties must spell out the time frames of what is achievable and not what is achievable. So it's quite important also to spell out exactly that things can't happen overnight. It's dependent on budget, it's dependent on available resources, and that's also a duty on each political party to portray that message as well.
I think, of course, it's unethical to make promises you can't keep. Unfortunately, the story coming out from most politicians these days are 5 years ago, we can create 5 million jobs. Now, a government generally is not in the business of creating real jobs. They create jobs in home affairs, in city councils, in service providers, in the jobs of public service. What they can do when they promise you something is they can create an environment that creates jobs, where small businesses can create jobs. Now, that's a promise that you can believe in. But when particular parties say to you that they can create jobs, what they are doing to you is they're lying to you. There's no other way to look at it. And that's unacceptable, and you need to hold them to account by telling them it's not acceptable.
Up to now, our politics are based on lies and total incapacity to hold anyone accountable. I mean, I come here and say, vote for me, then you vote, then what? What can you do? For 5 years, I'm getting this big money. And if you look at the amounts of money that parliamentarians earn, it's actually shocking. If you look at the general earnings of our people. So our politics are based on lies and unethical practices by those that we elect. So we need to find a way to hold accountable. Our vote cannot just be given on the basis of a promise, which we have no mechanism whatsoever to call for accounting. That is why in EFF we are very clear that let us punish our politicians. It cannot be voluntary that Helen Zille or someone else will take their children to that particular public school. Our parliamentarians are public servants. Themselves, they must go to public by law. All of them must go to those hospitals. Their children must go to those schools, because it's the only way that our education system can improve and the majority of our people can benefit. Right now, you vote for people, then they abandon the public sector completely. And this unethical thing that they give each other money to be able to get out of the public sector to actually exist in this enclave of elite, which in South Africa is well taken care of. And of course, we can go on and show that particular elite, the wealth that it has, it is based on, again, the unethical questions of land dispossession, oppression, exclusion, and mass murder of black people, which has not been accounted for.
I think a lot of the frustrations in society are caused by unfulfilled promises by politicians. And that does give the advent to groups such as the EFF that can make promises, as you've heard today, about nationalization, and well, that is something that they are offering the people that vote for them, and that one day. So again, the rising of such groups is as a result of frustrations on the ground by promises that are made. What I would suggest as a Christian is rather let us focus on God's promises, what He has promised for this nation, if we are obedient to His word. It's a win-win situation. And that is where we should be focusing our attention, as we've done with 2 Chronicles 7:14. And there's a lovely other scripture, when the righteous rule, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people mourn. Are we rejoicing or mourning? Thank you very much.
Good comments, good answers, good sermons, all in a bunch. Thank you. All right. Right now, you hear a lot of political parties speaking about, you know, they're going to make immense gains. You know, it seems almost as if every party is going to take over. In your very sincere and honest thinking of your party, what is your realistic view of the percentage of the national vote that you will get at this next election coming up?
It's very difficult for me to give an exact percentage because the figures fluctuate on literally a daily basis. After our launch, obviously, you know, 17,000 people in blue, and the numbers go up. But we do always expect the squeeze to start, and we start getting these bizarre comments from the ANC about devils and ancestors and odd things, and that also has an impact on the final figures. So it's very difficult to tell, but I think with the e-tolls furore and other issues that are going on in the country, which people are objecting to from literally grassroots level up, we're looking extraordinarily strong in provinces such as Gauteng and Northwest. But it's very difficult to call. It's in fact too early to call at this stage.
Thank you very much. I think the ANC had a very good registration weekends in November and also in the last registration period. We were especially very much heartened by the very good registration of the young voters, the under 30s, that make out of 50% of the electorate. If you look at the Markinor polls, that is usually the gold standard in South Africa. We're going to be very competitive in all the provinces, and I think we're going to come very close again to our current percentage nationally, because it depends usually on turnout on election day.
Agang for the past year has been going around the country in communities, farms, towns, townships, the Cape Flats, all across the country. And what we have found is citizens who are fed up. They've had enough. In the last national election, you had 13 million people who chose not to vote. That's 41% of the electorate. If you follow the studies and the stats, the number of voters who voted for the ANC, the current government, in the last election is 11.7 million. So you have a silent majority that sit there waiting for hope. They look for something more. And what we have found with new voices, which is what our country needs, new voices, both young and old, that's what citizens are looking for. The numbers, we remain hopeful, but we are a startup, and all people who start new things, they know that it is a struggle. But what we have seen is citizens with fire in their eyes who believe that change is possible. And I think that this election being a watershed moment, 20 years into a democracy, where more young people are eligible to vote, that's 5 to 7 million new voters coming on stream. The potential is there for change. Our numbers could be anything. Thank you.
I think that we can all agree that this election is going to be one of the most exciting elections. It is going to be, I mean, on the 8th, when the IEC start rolling those results, a lot of people are going to have many problems. The young party, we are not even a year old. And if you look at the sort of excitement that we generate in society, and also our politics, we are the only party which is clear. You have no doubt about what we stand for. You know we are going to nationalize these mines. You know we are going to expropriate land without compensation. We know that we are going to compel our politicians to use public services. So there's no beating about the bush about this. There's no gray area at all. It can also be said that we represent the majority. We represent the majority because of the political position that we have taken. You have no argument against the propositions that we make. No one can stand up here and tell us that it is unethical to redistribute land. 40,000 white families own 80% of this land in this country. How can it be ethical? How is it possible that mining houses, including the ANC, shoot and kill mine workers when they demand a living wage? Now, even the Christians, I'm sure, will agree, it is godly that workers. It is indeed, it is consistent with the desire of God that there must be justice.
Thank you for that. I agree that the election is going to be very exciting. I think that the challenge is going to be for all political parties to reach those disillusioned voters. The last elections, there were 5 million registered voters that stayed away. And I think that that is the challenge for all of us, is how to get to those voters. And again, that comes down to resources. And it's an issue which we have raised continually in Parliament, the availability of finances. And I know the EFF is fighting in court about the registration costs, 600,000 just to contest the election. So that is what we're faced with, is the amount of funds that you've got to spend, where those funds come from. And as far as the ACDP is concerned, obviously we are trusting for growth. The opinion polls are showing that we are featuring, but we would like to double up or treble our representation, and the future lies in your hands. Thank you very much.
Now, it's not easy holding some of the candidates back because their parties are being mentioned and they want to respond. So I'm trying desperately to hold them back. We've come to the last question, which I've held for last. And you can each use a good 3 minutes on there. Don't go beyond that. And if there is something that you feel that was absolutely incorrect to mention from the other, don't cause a debate, but in 2 or 3 words say why it's not the truth. But here is the question, the last one. And of course, it is many of these papers here, and it's a concern in our country that runs right up against what we believe, and that is to believe in ethics, in values, and clean living. The area of corruption. Tell us as a party, how serious are you really about eliminating corruption? And tell us, why should we believe you? Yeah.
As I start, if I could just correct one statement made today by Mr. Malema's colleague. The claim was that Helen Zilla's children had gone to private school. I fear that everything is painted according to race. In your eyes, sir, her children went to government schools. So you might want to correct that next time you're on a platform. As far as corruption is concerned, it is primary. I deal on a daily basis with crime and corruption. And everything we do, everything we say, everything we attend, we have this cloud of corruption hanging over the country and the fear of crime hanging over our heads. When I hear that for every building built by government, an honest architect draws up the plans and says it's going to cost 300 million, and when the tenders are called, it's for 450 million. And when he points out it was for 300 million, he's told to shut up. Now, he has an ethical dilemma. If he blows the whistle, he might as well shut his business down. If the lawyers who deal with the paperwork mention it, they're in breach of their entire profession. They will have their certificates torn up and be disbarred. It's an ethical dilemma that faces the entire country. Whistleblowers are treated incredibly poorly in this country. Their lives are at threat. I've had to hide people in this country before. So yes, corruption is something we have to tackle as a nation and take very seriously. Ethical behavior does not come naturally to this country today. It doesn't. It has to come out of events like this one and spread out from events like this to the rest of our communities. So when it comes to what we do about it, anything that is seen to be corrupt, I know when Helen Zille took over Cape Town, people said, well, what do we do now? Do we buy new cars? Is that one? She took them to the garage and said, there, all the old cars, pick one. Or shall we have a party to celebrate the fact that we won? She went to the shop, bought a packet of Mari biscuits and said, woohoo, there's your party, now work. That is how we run government. All the money that comes in goes out. 70% of it goes to underprivileged communities, and that's the only way to do it, is to run clean government that gets clean, 100% clean audits. When I look through the figures of the officials who have handed in their declarations, it's supposed to be done. Western Cape, 100%, other provinces, 20%. You have to run a province like you would run a country, and that's exactly what we do.
Corruption undermines delivery. The ANC has put in place strict laws to prosecute corruption and safeguard state money. We have set up powerful institutions like the Public Protector, the Special Investigating Unit, and the Hawks to combat corruption. Thousands of public servants have been prosecuted or dismissed, and there are more than 190 investigations against big fish. In 1994, we had weak laws against corruption and money laundering and no anti-corruption units. Having set up the SIU, Public Protector, Asset Forfeiture, Hawks, and they investigate thousands of cases each year. Now, our immediate plans after the elections is to strengthen the key anti-corruption body of the SIU that investigates corruption in the public service, improve capacity of financial officers and managers in government through better recruitment, assessment and ongoing training. For example, all senior managers in municipalities now have to pass a 2-year course in financial management. The NDP also aims for a professional public service where managers deal properly with contracts and procurement and are less vulnerable to political or other pressure. Maybe just to take an example or extract from the Minister of Finance's budget review in terms of corruption. The Accountant General has conducted numerous forensic investigations into alleged irregularities and financial misconduct in the public service. In Limpopo, 27 forensic investigations, Limpopo, sir, had led to more than 300 cases being opened. 2 heads of the department and the Director General of the province were suspended and 45 officials have been charged. That's action. In Free State, 5 officials were dismissed as a result of an illegal roads procurement scheme. 6 were suspended from the Human Settlements Department and other investigations are on the way. In provincial public works departments, there are concerns about corruption, abuse, and charging inflated prices for infrastructure projects. Provinces are taking action to end such practices. In Mpumalanga and Northwest, heads of Human Settlement and Public Works departments have been suspended and charged. And in the Eastern Cape, public works officials have been suspended. So there is action on corruption. There is action. Just the last issue, the colleague from the EFF made the statement that the ANC kills mine workers. That is a very, very irresponsible statement, and I don't think that is the way to campaign. The ANC is a party that facilitates an economy where all sectors can fruitfully participate.
Our view on corruption is very simple. Corruption is a crime. It steals textbooks from schools. It steals medicines from hospitals. It builds houses that are a threat and danger to people. Corruption builds settlements, tiny little matchbox houses. It doesn't build communities. We have a zero-tolerance approach to corruption, a 15 minimum year sentence for those found guilty of corruption. Issues such as the politicization of institutions like the National Prosecuting Authority is corruption. Issues which undermine the Public Protector, Chapter 9 institutions is corruption. Issues which undermine a free media is corruption. These are all issues which are unacceptable, and we are tired, and I think all South Africans are tired of those who pay lip service to the issue of rooting out corruption. What you need is firm action, and it's not just political will, you need action.
Firstly, the ANC is not going to tell EFF how we're going to campaign or to run our projects. But I also think that it's unfortunate that after the murdering of Marikana workers, we can sit here and deny that the police were called to kill, massacre our people and say it's not the ANC that killed them. Under apartheid, when the National Party killed our children in Soweto, we're very clear that it was the National Party that killed those children. Now, the ANC kills workers. And I sit here with a man that tells me that the ANC does not. I mean, this is an erasure and spitting on the memory of those that the ANC killed for demanding a living wage. I will not accept it. And there will be reparations. You know, I am sent here to the Western Cape to liberate this undemocratic Republic of the Western Cape from the DA. The DA does not listen, just like the ANC. Does not listen, does not see. You know, I never said Helen did not take her children to, and I made it clear it cannot be voluntary. It must be compulsory, right? Now, no, this is the point. You're not listening. I mean, and we're going to solve it. Let's talk about corruption. We need a paradigm shift on how we understand this question. It cannot be that a clean audit, you have a clean audit and you say you're corrupt free. But people here, black people, colored people, if you like, well, all of them black, when there's rains and little floods, people die here. And that is not part of how you factor in these clean audits. The fact that people in this province, they still use the bucket system. And so you look at the figures, because you look at white society, the section white society, and you serve them. And then you say, you have dealt with corruption. For us, corruption, we need a paradigm shift. We have to start thinking about how general population, particularly the vulnerable majority, is affected by our accounting system, is affected by how we deliver. Then we'll deal also with the private sector, because there's this notion that private sector somehow it is not involved in corruption, massive corruption. And the DA, and of course the ANC, will never say anything about this.
Can I just ask the Commissar, because he only has about a few seconds left, to also help answer the question, how serious does your party take the issue of corruption? Talk to us about that.
In our manifesto, of course, we say that anybody who's found to be corrupt, we must have a minimum jail sentence for such people, and we put it 20 years. We're very clear about that. Anyone who is found guilty of corruption must be sentenced to a minimum sentence of 20 years. We're very clear. I mean, we're serious about not taking from society. But we're also very clear that we are not going to make it a narrow thing of the tender system here and there. It is the overall system which excludes the majority from the economy of this country, which is the corrupt basis, if you like, of what happens next.
Thank you.
The ACDP is also outraged by the levels of corruption, and we will not be able to eradicate systemic poverty until we eradicate systemic corruption. For the 15 years that I've been in Parliament with the Justice Committee, we've drafted incredibly effective laws, but it's the implementation and the political will to implement those laws. Diane and myself fought the closure of the Scorpions, which was closed because it was too effective in fighting corruption. The secrecy bill is another issue which we as the ACDP have been at the forefront of redrafting, and it was as a result of my petition on a particular issue that the President referred that law back to Parliament, and it has been substantially improved. And those of you that drive outside Parliament, there's a massive, and my commendation to the Catholic Church that says the truth will set you free, say no to the secrecy bill. But we have, as parliamentarians, engaged and improved the laws. Again, it is an issue of the implementation. And we are all, the elephant in the room, of course, is the Nkandla report, which are awaiting, I think it's on the 19th of March, where the public protector will come out what we expect to be quite a scathing report. And then it will be what steps will be taken as a result of that. But secrecy is the yeast that feeds the dough of corruption. We need to make sure we have a free press, strong opposition, so that we can engage the governing party, whoever that may be. Thank you very much.
That's our show for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. The issue of corruption is on most people's minds, and I hope what was discussed at this panel discussion answered some of the questions you've been asking. Please remember to go to our website, familypolicyinstitute.com, and register for my weekly newsletter. Also remember that the latest issue of Joy magazine is available in retail stores across the country. Please pick up your copy today. Remember also to SMS STAND to 48833 to donate 10 Rand to the work of Family Policy Institute. Thank you for joining us tonight. God bless you, and remember to keep on standing.